I want to turn to Ministra Arbeleche, if I might, next. And picking up a bit from what Mohammed Maid was saying, uh, we want the MDBs to play a bigger role in financing. We also want them to be much more effective in mobilizing private capital flows. The record on mobilizing private capital flows so far has been mixed, if you like, not great. And from where you sit, what do you think, particularly for the purpose of supporting global public goods like climate change, what do you think can be done to make the World Bank's and the MDB's offer more attractive? And how could they be more effective in mobilizing private financing? Is that a priority for you?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. It is a priority, and I think that, thank you for the invitation. It just comes at the right time for what our country is, the process that we are going through right now. So just let me begin with a broader concept regarding how we understand global public goods, so that we can see how we address this point. So for us, we think that the country has to walk through an inclusive and sustainable development. That's important because we don't see global challenges or in which climate is one of them, and development as two different things, but rather development for us should reach all our inhabitants, so it should be inclusive, and at the same time it has to be sustainable. And that brings us to the question, or to the point of adaptation and mitigation on the climate front. So we come to the concept of global public good. But of course, global public good doesn't see frontiers. So a country has costs to produce a public good, and other countries benefit from that. So this changes completely the way and makes us rethink the kind of instruments that we have. Let me complete this idea of global public good, the climate global public good, by saying that we think that Uruguay, it's not only incorporating climate, it's the climate view because it's important for lives, it's important for having better health and welfare for inhabitants, but as economic policy makers, we have to incorporate that into what we do, because at the end of the day, if we want more investment, more exports, to grow, ultimately to create more jobs, that is what we need. And this was exactly what Nicholas Stern was saying this morning in the Coalition for Finance Ministers. So it's not something different. We have to mainstream this into our economic policy. All this at a time, as Minister from Egypt said, where we have major challenges. We have a rise in the prices of food, of energy, high debts, increasing interest rates, and one crisis, one shock after the other. We have pandemic, now we have the war in Ukraine. So again, as policymakers, we have to be very careful how we allocate the resources we have. The money we have, that is not our money, it's the money from our people. Do we allocate these resources into urgent needs that we need to tackle right now? Meaning protecting the lives of our citizens because of the pandemic, protecting the purchasing power of our citizens because we have inflation. We had to give some direct income transfers to our citizens. Or shall we allocate resources with this longer term perspective and be careful with our environment? And in Uruguay, we have been for many years very focused on climate action, but I would say that this administration that took office on March 1st, 2020, for us it's an important date because 2 days after that we had pandemic in Uruguay and in the world. So for us, I think that we have an inflection point regarding the mainstreaming of environmental policies in economic policy. And we try to keep, to balance the urgent challenges with the high beam headlights on at the same time. And I think that is exactly what we have to do. So what is the current situation for this provision of global public goods? And going to your question of the role of not only World Bank, but multilaterals in general, the diagnosis that we have from a middle-income country like Uruguay is that we see very fragmented donors, lack of coordination, lots of offerings to give us resources, but that not always are incorporated or fit into the into the country's strategy. So it's important to consider the strategy that each country does have. At the same time, we don't see a coordination, or let's put it in a positive way. I think there's room for more coordination amongst different institutions, experts on climate like United Nations. What have we done with our commitments and NDCs? We have an important base there that should be coordinated with other institutions. Multilateral institutions should coordinate amongst themselves. We see different institutions going to the same projects or doing the same kind of things. And of course, also we have the funds and investors. I think with the whole actors should be coordinated. And there, in this diagnosis, what we see in terms of climate finance is that we have changes or challenges both on the demand side and on the supply side. So on the demand side, as I think the Minister of Egypt made it clear, we don't have the correct incentives as middle-income countries to borrow money to produce global public goods, which are for everybody, not only for the country. So I think that will answer my question about the World Bank.
Yes.
And regarding supply, it's also important to have more funds, to have more instruments for our countries. So the supply may need either tensing the balance sheet from the multilateral institutions, but of course we have to be very careful that we keep the AAA in these institutions. And of course, if we give more resources from the current balance sheet of the multilateral, of the MDBs, then all of us as shareholders, being middle or upper income countries, we are all like paying for this. I heard just some minutes ago, Liliana Rojas proposing, I was outside the room, but I heard something like a focused capitalization targeted to certain areas. So maybe we need to pull in more capital. Let's see who has to put in more capital, but we need to pull more capital, but targeted for certain areas. And then finally, I do think that in this supply of resources, there's a very concrete responsibility or room for a role, let's put it that way, a very concrete role for developed countries that they have already made their the development. They have gone through this phase at a cost of emission of greenhouse gases. So I think that there's an important role for the donors and for them to be donors and finally to commit to the pledges that they have presented. But up to now, as was said, we didn't see these pledges fulfilled. So concretely, what can the World Bank do apart from more coordination, less fragmentation? I think that there is a very unique opportunity for multilateral banks to come in with innovative financial instruments where the correct incentives are in place. And here, let me share with you to see what I'm meaning, what Uruguay has presented last month, not for disbursement loans from MDBs, but that could be the case. We presented a framework for an eventual issuance of a bond linked to sustainability, a sustainability-linked bond. That same scheme could be used for multilateral institutions. So what Uruguay presented, we chose, based on the Paris Agreement, we chose 2 key performance indicators based on our NDC1s, one of which is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and in terms of GDP, and the other one is conservation of natural forestry. And this didn't come out just from our teams. It came out from different conversations with investors all over the world. Maybe Europe was the area where we didn't go that much. The new area, let's say for us, apart from London, but we had a lot of conversations. We came to this, choosing these two indicators. So what we have in this framework is, okay, we issue a bond. If we overperform these objectives, then we are rewarded, as the minister said. That is what we need. We are rewarded and we pay less coupon. If we underperform, then we pay a higher coupon. So I think that this is a pioneer instrument that could be used also in MDBs. Of course, the question comes, if we leave aside the scheme for investors and we think about MDBs, who is going to pay the step down if we have a good environmental behavior? There's a step down. So who will give the MDB the money, the difference with this step down? And again, this brings us to the discussion I've said before. Is it the balance sheet of the multilaterals? Is it new capital, new funds from the multilaterals, the scale fund from the World Bank? Is it the global public good funds that the World Bank already has? It has to put more resources into it, but those are the kind of questions. Or is it what we think ultimately should be? Is it that developed countries have to share, I like to put it in this way, share the dividends of the development that they have done, that they have gone through in the past, because they have been polluters, so it's time that they deliver concrete resources for middle-income countries in this correct instrument. So to wrap up, I think that, again, it's important that middle-income countries, we go through a process of inclusive and sustainable development. And that development and the transition, the green transition that this implies, means that we need new financial instruments and that have the correct incentives for countries, and also that we need developed countries to come up and put the money where their mouth is, to put it in a very strong way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ministra Arbeleche.